Hello and welcome to our final day in the 7-day Hired Straight Out of College Challenge. We are so excited to have you with us as we start our last session and our last day. Today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Jess Andrews, and Jess works as the Director of Operations with a company called Advance Your Reach. Advance Your Reach is one of the top growing companies right now. They are growing right now, even during this crisis. And this is good news for you if you're looking for a job, because this means that there are job openings actually happening during this time. So there's lots of hope for you. Now, Jess didn't start off helping to coach people become great speakers and direct a team like this. She actually started off in the gas field. And so she was working as an engineer and really helping in the field to help people. And then she switched, and now she's here with us today. So let's welcome Jess Andrews in as she talks to us about how to do video interviewing and how to work in a virtual practice.
Hi, thank you so much, Mary. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you on with us. I know when I had the opportunity to meet you, I guess it was back in December, I think it was. I was very impressed by you. I thought, wow, that you are so talented, you are so skilled, and I just love the way your whole team ran, and you could tell that you guys had systems and things in place, and that's not always something that I see. So I was not only impressed by the company, but I was super impressed by you, and so we're grateful to have you on with us today. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing today and what your company has been up to? I know you guys have a lot of great things going on.
Yeah, for sure. So the company I work for is Advance Your Reach, and I started with them about 3 years ago. It was in 2017. And at that time, we had about 3 employees, and we've grown our organization from 3 team members and an annual revenue of about $1 million to now we're up to about 35 team members. And we've already for this year hit our budgeted goal, our original budgeted goal, not our COVID budget goal. And we are well on our way to our original stretch goal. So it is super exciting that we have found a way in this COVID world to still be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys do a great job pivoting, and you guys really care about taking care of people and giving people a great experience. And I think when you take care of people and you serve people and you keep that faith that you can pivot and you can make things happen. So to help people to understand, because Advance Your Reach, you guys are an entirely virtual company.
We are. Our whole team is remote. They didn't originally start out that way. So our founder, Pete Vargas, he's originally from Texas, but he settled in Colorado Springs. And originally his employees were there in Colorado Springs. I was his first probably virtual staff member. I'm about 3 hours east of there on the eastern plains of Colorado. And so we connected by video, by Zoom. And we kind of grew. As we started growing, we realized that we could tap more talent, better talent, more qualified, skilled talent if we cast the net wider than just within driving range of, at that time, his home office. And we were really able to then snatch up some of that great talent by doing that, by going remote. And now our entire team is remote. We do have about 5 to 7 team members that are in Colorado, Denver, Colorado Springs area, but the vast majority of them are not, including our directors. All of us are, except one, are remote.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, and I think that's such a great way to expand your company, because you really can get the top talent if you're not just pulling out of your small pool. And one thing I have to say is, from going to so many of the Advance Your Reach events, it's always interesting because I'll meet somebody, and I think 2 or 3 times, it might have been 3 times, but at least twice, I've actually met people on their very first day with you. I would have had no clue that it was their first day. Like, not like my first day out of training, but like their first day. And I think that really speaks to the quality of people that you're hiring, because literally I'm like, like one time we were working through a little bit of an issue with like name tags, and like it totally, things always happen, right? As much as you plan, like something always happens. There's something that doesn't line up exactly like it's supposed to. And this wonderful team member of yours, she was working through it calmly with no problem. She's just like, yeah, we're gonna take care of everything. And I'm just like, oh my God, most team members can't handle things that calmly when they've been in a company for a while, let alone it being your first day. And she's just like, we got it. We're going to take care of everything here. And so,
well, we look at hiring kind of like a marriage. We date for a really, really long time. There may be some companies that, put out the job description, put out the job post, they find somebody with the skill set and they hire them because they need a warm body and they need them now. That's not how we look at hiring. It's a really, I wouldn't say drawn out process, but it's a very thoughtful process that we go through, because we do see it like we don't want to go through a divorce with this person. We want this to be a long lasting relationship. But in order for that to happen, we have to really get to know each other. And so we do have a longer hiring process. We have a thorough onboarding process so that we can really set them up for success, and then we can both be happy.
Yeah, I think that's really great. So did you kind of bring that process into Advance Your Reach, and did you help to kind of cultivate and create this process?
I can't take credit for it.
Okay.
We, in 2017, as we started to grow and the business kind of started shifting a little bit, we actually adopted the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. It's based on a book by Gino Wickman called Traction. And we brought in an EOS implementer that really helped us set up the structure of our organization and how we were going to move forward as an organization. And part of that is determining our core values and then hiring and firing based on those core values. And so in order to really get to the meat of somebody that you're talking to through the interview process, we had to switch the way that we interviewed to really figure out if there was core values alignment. We can teach skill set. If somebody doesn't know how to use a particular program, or somebody doesn't know, the basics of marketing, but we need somebody in marketing, we can teach them that. We can put them through training. We can send them to conferences. We can put them through courses. But you can't change the underlying structure of what makes somebody tick, right? And so we have core values as an organization that we use through that hiring process. And sometimes there's alignment and sometimes they're not. And just because there isn't alignment doesn't mean they're not a great employee for another company. Doesn't mean that they're not a right fit for another organization. It just means that it's not a right fit for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate companies that do that, because it's better to be told no at the beginning and during the hiring process than getting hired into an organization where you're not a fit, and then you have to go through that process too, because it's not only stressful on the company, but it's also stressful on the employee, having to feel like, well, why did I fail? Why couldn't I make this work? And so I think that's a really wise way to go about the hiring process. So walk us through a little bit of your hiring process. I'd like to just understand, because you guys are all virtual, and we can walk through a little bit of the process and maybe even give some tips along the way. Like, what have some of the candidates done that have really stood out to you?
Sure. And so, like anything, our process has evolved, right? So in our organization, whether it's one of our workshops or whether it's one of our live events, we always add like a 2.0 or a 3.0 or a 10.0 on the end, because, we're always evolving and improving, And so in our hiring process, we're probably in our 4.0 stage. And when I was hired originally by Pete, he found me on Upwork and hired me as a contractor to work with him. And then as we grew as an organization, within about 7 to 8 months, we decided that we needed to have actual employees instead of everyone we were bringing on be contractors, right? Because there's just a little bit more, they're vested more as an employee than as a contractor. As a contractor, there's a little bit more freedom, a little more you're hiring me with this contract, so I'll, do what I want when I want, versus, no, we really need you to meet these deadlines and some of those other things. So we kind of have evolved in that we started it with contractors, we moved to employees, now it's completely an employment process. And so the stage that we're in now, it really depends on the position. So with certain positions, we may have sort of a headhunting company look for us. For example, with administrative assistants, we have found a great partner with Tim Francis and Great Assistants, in that they have a really dialed in process to find just the ideal candidate to bring us when it comes to an administrative assistant. Now, when it comes to maybe a more technical position or a creative position, we have other ways that we go about using them. We too will lean on Upwork sometimes to find the perfect candidate. We also use LinkedIn Recruiter. If it's a very niche type of role, then we may even use a different type of headhunting organization. But for all of them, we have a hiring page, advancedyourreach.com/dream team. And that's where we put all of our open positions. We usually have people submit a 5-minute video that answers specific questions. And yes, we want to know the answers to those questions. We also want to know if you can follow directions and do what we ask within that. Because if you can't, you're immediately eliminated from the process, right?
Yeah.
After that 5-minute video has been submitted, our HR manager will take a look at that. If she feels like it's still a good fit, then she passes that on to the department head that is actually looking for that position to be filled, to review, to look at that person's resume, to look at any additional information they may have sent in, and decide to set up an interview. Sometimes we'll do the interview first. Sometimes what we'll actually do is have a Kolbe assessment done. So Kolbe is similar to many of those personality tests that people have taken, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, there's a lot of them out there. Kolbe is the only one, though, that it can be held up in a court of law for hiring and firing. So
I didn't know that.
Why we use it. Fun fact that our EOS owner told us, but that's not why we use it. The reason we use Kolbe is that we found that it is actually really, really informative on what this person's just natural inclinations are. And depending on the position, you're looking for a different type of Kolbe score. And you can also see if what their Kolbe score is based on or compared to what the ideal is for that position. And if there's a big gap, then there's naturally going to be tension working with that person. There's no right or wrong Kolbe. It's a matter of what you need versus who they are. And so again, it comes back to, we don't want to set somebody up for failure because they're coming in and already there's a gap in expectations. So a lot of times we'll do the Kolbe first and then the interview, or sometimes we'll do the interview and the Kolbe or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think you've given us a lot of really good things here, because one thing I've heard is, you guys go to Upwork or you go to these other organizations. So if you're watching this and you're like, hey, I'm looking for something, it may be good to go get aligned and see what recruitment agencies out there may help to fill positions in your area, because that may be a great way to get matched, especially if you're a great team member. The other thing I heard is, things like Upwork and things like that. So if you do have a specific skill set, go get that experience, go get that freelance work. You can get your start in that, and you can do that now, and then you can start to build up your credibility, and you'll probably even learn a few extra skills along the way. The other thing I think that's really important that you said is, when you have them submit that 5-minute video, you're really looking for them to follow the directions. And that is so key during these interview processes. Like, you do want to follow the directions. Could be a little creative, but you want to make sure that you're hitting the high points on what the people are looking for, not trying to say, well, it would be better this way, or we should do it that way, and really following through on those processes. And then the last thing you said with the Kolbe, I could not agree with you more. We use the Kolbe, and we actually do it more after they're hired usually. And I can see why you'd want to do it before sometimes, because people do, if they're fact finders or if they're quick starts, they may have challenges just completing the task, not because they're not great employees, but just because that's not how they process things, or it may take you a lot more time to get them to actually get up to speed. So really great. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've gotten to the point, especially if we have 40 candidates for a particular position, we use the Colby. And if there's not alignment there, if there's more than 3 points difference between what our expectations are and what their Colby score is, we won't even move on in the process. We'll go through the candidates that actually there's alignment there.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah. So after the Colby, there's an initial interview. Sometimes there's a phone screening with our HR manager. Other times it'll be an interview with the director. And then depending on the position, there may be a second round of interviews, and we may even have a challenge that's done. So for example, right now, we're in the market for somebody that does data analysis, who's really good with Infusionsoft and HubSpot and can really pull data and create, amazing reports that really give us all the metrics and KPIs that we're looking for, and, revenue and conversion rates and click rates and all that stuff that we can get from our CRMs. And in that process, we have a challenge. So it's like, okay, great. We loved your video. We're interested in interviewing you. Here is this challenge. And we let them know what the vision of the challenge is, what the directions are. We provide them resources. We let them know what the deadline is and how we need them to submit their information. And then we get those challenges in from multiple people, and we're able to watch them and see, like, how do they present the information? How do they articulate what they've done? How deep do they dive into what we requested? Have they gone above and beyond what we requested? How do they show up in this challenge? And when we get that back, then we can take that and say, okay, well, we got these 5, we had this pool of 40, and we narrowed it down to 5 that we sent challenges to. And out of these 5, these are the top 3. And so those we might do interviews with. And that's where I would really do more of a core values assessment. At that point, I've already evaluated their skill set, their Colby, all of that kind of stuff. And now it's a matter of, how do they fit with the rest of our team?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I'm glad that you brought up this challenge things, because sometimes this comes up and the employer wants you to actually produce something or do a project or give them ideas. And sometimes I think people are hesitant to do that because they're like, I'm not going to work for free, or I don't, or they won't put as much time into it or as much effort. And the truth is that if you really want that job, you're discounting yourself. The company is not trying to get free work. They're trying to hire the most qualified candidate. So that way, once they hire the person, they know what they're getting, they know what to expect. And I think it's really a time to shine instead of doing the bare minimum or almost being disgruntled that they're even asking for it.
Yeah, it's huge. One candidate that we recently, for one of our positions that we just immediately crossed off the list, was because we were going to be sharing specific data that had to do with, like, our revenue numbers, some customer information, not personal information, but more like demographics, that kind of thing, that we really felt needed to be kept confidential. Sometimes we'll ask them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, before we provide them the resources to do the challenge. And we had one candidate come back and say, I'm not comfortable signing that. I'm not going to do it. We said, okay, we'll move on to the next one. So that was an indication to us that they weren't willing to go above and beyond to show us what they were doing, or why they were of value to our organization. Another example would be, we just had 3 challenges come back last week that I viewed. And there were 2 of the candidates that took 20 minutes to walk through their presentation. They put it together in PowerPoint. They showed us how they got from point A to point B. I could very clearly see how they addressed every single one of the points that I had in the challenge tasks. And then the third candidate, it was about a 9-minute video. It was very high level, glossed over, didn't dive too deep. And it was unfortunate because that person had been our leading contender for the role. That was the one that I was like, I'm really excited to see what this person brings back, because on paper, their resume looked great.
Right.
But then when I got their challenge, I was really underwhelmed. And so for me, then I'm not going to consider that person. I'm going to consider the other two that really went the extra mile, that researched our company, that went into some of our public Facebook groups, that looked at some of the comments, that really tried to figure out who is our audience, who is our customer, and how can they speak to that in the presentations that they're putting together.
Yeah, that's incredible. It really does show. We don't always do a challenge. We do more of what is it called? I forget what we call the name of the interview, but basically during this interview, we have 5 or 6 different team members come in. It's a focus interview. And during this, they have to show us different examples of their previous work or how they've done things in the past. And you'll see it sometimes. They get from the one interview where it's like, oh my gosh, I love this person. They're so amazing. Like we almost want to work with 2 candidates or 3 candidates. And then you get into this next one where you're discovering what their work actually is. And sometimes they can't show you anything. And you're just like, how did you run marketing in the past if you don't have any marketing to show us? And
right.
So you really got to be able to show that proof and show that you can do the job. So
absolutely.
You're going to work for a great company though, when they want you to do the challenge or they want you to show previous work. And even if you're just straight out of college, it doesn't mean that you can't show things that you've done in college. It can't mean that you can't make things up or you can't get on Upwork or you can't show things that you've even done, even if it's in an unrelated role. It can all be relevant and important.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And, some of the most impressive candidates for me have been ones that, post interview, not only have they followed up by saying, thank you so much for taking the time to meet me, which is just, it's good manners. It's being polite, so that's great. But the ones that have really kind of knocked my socks off are the ones that have not only followed up to say thank you, but they said, you asked me about this and I know that I shared XYZ, but I also wanted to share this. And they might send some slides or some images or screenshots of something that will take me deeper into what they were trying to explain. So if I'm asking them, what's your experience using Kajabi, for example, right? Oh, well, I've done this or I've done that. And they weren't prepared to show me something on screen, right? But when they follow up, they've sent me screenshots of what they've built or what they've created or something like that in their follow-up, which says that they care. They're interested, they're hungry, right? They really want to be a part of this organization.
Yeah, I think that's great. Following up with something additional to show or to give.
Mm-hmm.
Because that really shows, especially when you can align it, right? If you are a marketing person and you can go on and look at their website and say, hey, this is how I would change things. This is what I would do. That's valuable. It shows that you know that what you're talking about, especially if you can explain why you would do it. So I love that. Okay, so they go through this challenge, mm-hmm. And then what's next?
So when we've narrowed it down, depending on the position, if it's a director position, they may go on to meet with, or they will go on to meet with Pete, the founder of our company and the owner of our company. If it's not a director level position, it's a project manager, it's a coordinator, sales rep, something like that. They've likely gone through that whole process and then interviewed with a director. And then they most often will then also interview with me, depending on the position, more for the cultural fit than the skill set fit. And then once I've met with them, my interview process, like I said, is all around core values. I'm trying to figure out where there's alignment. And I don't just come out and say, do you exhibit this core value? And if so, how? Instead, I ask questions that are more requesting of them to tell me stories about themselves, experiences from their past, which then will allow me to determine how did they exhibit, what core values did they exhibit in those experiences, and do those align with any of our current core values? Or is there misalignment with them? So as an example of that, one of our core values is flexibility. And as I'm talking to somebody and I'm asking them, perhaps, what was the situation that was really difficult for you in one of your prior positions, or as you were going through college, or even in your personal life? And then they talk to me about how they handled that. And if they're talking about that they really just, they like their structure, and they don't like having things changed, and they don't want this and they don't want that, and it has to be exactly so, and they don't like their plans being adjusted, then right there, that tells me that that's great. Like, they're a structured person. They need that organization, and that's going to be perfect for some company, but it's not perfect for our company because we move quickly, because we pivot so much. We need to have flexibility. Not that we don't have systems and processes, not that we don't plan, but things always come up. Things always happen. For example, nobody knew COVID was going to hit, right, the way it did. We had plans in place. We had our quarterly planning. We had our rocks set. We knew what we were marching towards. And then that happened. So that's like a big, high, crazy, example of a pivot. But we have those happen on a smaller basis too. And so if somebody just through their nature isn't comfortable with that, then they're going to be very uncomfortable working for our organization. And our team is going to be really uncomfortable working for them or work with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, because if you guys are trying to turn or make a pivot or do something, and someone's like, well, no, like I can't do that, or like is unwilling, where it feels like if when you have these people that are aligned, okay, we know we need to be flexible. Well, now they're probably thinking of how to change, they were part of that solution for you instead of a resistance to the company, because they already know, like, we're going to be flexible. So we're going to change things. We're going to do things differently. And so yeah, it makes all the difference. I love hiring with the core values in place. It really can change things. But, okay, so now they meet with you and they go through this interview. And you do these all over Zoom?
Yes, they're all over Zoom, with the exception of anyone meeting with Pete. They may meet with him in person because they're a director level, and so that he has more of like a 4-hour half day that he wants to spend with this person. But otherwise, for the rest of our positions, they're by Zoom. I might even have a follow-up interview with them if there's some additional things I thought of, or an additional something I want added to their challenge. And again, somebody is like, oh my gosh, now we're going through this other thing. But like I said, we like to date. We like to date our candidates before we commit to marrying them. And it also lets us know how committed and how excited are they to work with our organization. So once we made the decision, though, that this is the person that we want to move forward with, then we'll send them an offer letter and kind of lay out what the details are of the compensation and, some of our general policies around PTO and that sort of thing. And then once they sign off on that offer letter saying, yes, they want to come on board with us, then we get them an employment agreement, and then we kick off the onboarding process.
Okay, so since you do a lot of video interviewing, can you give us some tips or some things that people should do when getting on a video interview that would maybe make their interview better, or maybe help them to connect? Because I know it's a little different than talking to somebody in person.
Yeah, so I guess I'm so used to being on video that it's like talking to anybody else that's in the room. But really just remembering to connect, right? So if you're constantly looking outside at your dog or what's happening with, the kids or the clouds in the sky, you're not present. You're not looking that person in the eye. You're not making that connection. If there's a lot of background noise, a lot of things happening and, going on, whether it's like I have children. And so for me, it's always the kids, right? They're in the basement and they're playing, but the noise comes up or something like that. You don't want those impressions. One of the videos that I watched on a challenge, this guy had like 2 or 3 dogs and they were just bark, 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 bark the entire time. I could not concentrate on what he was presenting in the challenge because I was so distracted by the dogs barking in the background. I had an interview one time for a potential team member. We did not move forward with them, where their background, they were fresh out of college. They were interviewing in their room, and their background, it was their bed piled with clothes. There were clothes on the floor. There were open containers of like fast food and bags of fast food. It was filthy, absolutely filthy. And I thought, I cannot believe that this person showed up for a video interview with that as their background. Like right there, I cut the interview short. I thanked them for their time, but it said to me that if they weren't willing to put forth the effort to show up prepared, then for an interview, how are they going to show up in the day-to-day job, right? So make sure you have a clean appearance yourself, clean appearance in your background, eliminate distractions, make eye contact. Just think about it. If you were going to go in person to an interview, would you bring your dogs with you? If you're going to go in person to an interview, would you have your dirty laundry slung over your shoulder? Would you not look at the person you were talking to and look at the picture on their wall? No, you're going to look at them, right? So just think about how you would show up in an in-person interview and show up the same way for a virtual interview.
Yeah, that's really important to think about that background and what's happening and what's around you and how do you feel and what do you look like and where are you sitting, and wow, it's crazy these things happen. Like sometimes you're interviewing and you're like, how is this happening?
I know.
How is this happening? How did they not think of this? But
yes, and now that I've said that, my children are probably going to barge in and be really loud and obnoxious.
I saw them camping out under the stars the other night. That looked awesome. And then
two nights in a row they've done that.
That's fun. I was like, oh, it's not getting cold there at night, I guess, or they like it.
Oh, it's chilly. They're in really big sleeping bags and extra blankets and fuzzy socks. And
that's awesome. Building great memories, Mom.
Yes.
So that's fun. All right. So then they do this video interview, and then you send them the offer letter, and now they're onboarding and we're getting started. So help us, just because you have been the only guest that we've had on that always works virtual. Like you guys are a virtual office. So I would love for you to share some tips, because whether it's through COVID or maybe somebody does land a job virtually, what can they do to be successful as a team member being virtual?
One of the biggest struggles that I've seen for team members that are doing virtual for the first time or converting, maybe they've just not had a job before that was like really a 9-to-5 type of Monday through Friday kind of job. The biggest struggle for them is communication. So because we're virtual, we tend to have more flexibility on schedules. If I have to go do something with my kids in the afternoon at school or pick them up or something and I need to be gone for a couple hours, that's fine. And I'm going to put in a couple hours in the evening after they're in bed, or I might put them in, I'm going to make up that time so that I get my job done and I meet my responsibilities and my deadlines. But I need to communicate. I can't just disappear. And the rest of the team is trying to reach me on Slack or an email or Box. And they're like, where's Jessica? I need to find Jessica. Well, I need to communicate to them, hey guys, I'm going to be out for a couple of hours. If you need to reach me, you can send me a text. I won't be in Slack. If I have team members that I work with that I'm supervising, and I need to reach them and I need to send them an urgent task and they're nowhere to be found, I'm extremely frustrated, because as far as I know, they didn't take the day off. So why are they not responding? So I think communication is key, and letting people know it's okay. You're human. You have other things going on, right? But you have to communicate. You wouldn't just, if you were in an in-person office environment, you wouldn't just walk out the door and not tell anybody where you were going or when you'd be back. And they'd sit there guessing, like, why isn't John in his office? I don't know. Well, did you see John leave? I don't know. And then everyone's like, where's John? So communicate. Just let people know, hey, I've got to go do this. I'll be back XYZ time.
Yeah, that's really great. It sets a good expectation. And then you may actually get to enjoy your children for a couple hours too, because they may say, we're not going to bother Jess. It can wait 3 hours. I know even today I decided, like, because I'm working doing a virtual conference over the weekend. I'm like, I'm going to be working all weekend. I should take a day off. And so I had a meeting with my team and I'm like, I'm going to be off for the rest of the day. If you guys need me, I'm here, but I know they're not going to call me because they're not going to have any emergencies that can't wait till tomorrow. But if I wouldn't have communicated that, I can be assured all day I would have interruptions, or tomorrow somebody would be like, well, why didn't you get this done? Or why didn't you respond to my email? And now everybody just knows, like, she's not working today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. The other one is preparing and preparing others for you being gone. So you know what your roles and responsibilities are. And in our organization, even though we're at 35 people, there are some team members that they're the only person that is in that seat. So for example, we have one videographer. And so we have he's got a queue of videos that he's working on, things he's editing, stuff that he needs to get out. But if he's going to be gone for the day, then we need to know if we had an urgent video request or need, who would be the backup. So our creative services tech, he's not as knowledgeable on video, but he can edit video, right? So it's not like we're asking him to put together a 5-minute potential commercial for a virtual event. We're asking him to trim something, So knowing who that backup is and communicating that, not just to your supervisor, but your other team members within the department, so that they know who to go to in your absence. That's a huge help as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great tip, whether you're virtual or you're in an office, but always covering your role so people know who to go to and your stuff is taken care of if you're going to take, whether it's a day or a week off, but you get your work covered and taken care of, so things aren't slipping through the cracks because you're just not there.
Right.
That's really great.
Yeah. And it's not just that, but like connect with that person. Let them know, like, these are the things that I'm working on. If somebody's asking for an update, this is the status of them. If something new comes in, I appreciate you taking it on, but please also note it here so that I know what was done in my absence. We're actually in the process of creating an out of office sort of a checklist, like the things that we want folks to do if they're going to be out just for a day or, 4 or 5 days for vacation, so that we make sure that everybody is in the know of who do you go to, what are the resources that they might need, where do they find those resources, how do they document what they worked on in your absence, and how does it get handed back over, right? There needs to be this handoff process so that there's smooth transition and it doesn't create additional work for anybody. And so we're actually in the process of developing that, just because we've seen some of the hiccups happen, and one department may do it one way and another department another way. And so we're just creating an umbrella AYR way of out of office plan. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's great. We even have a structured message that goes up in the emails when you're out of office, because I'm like, I feel like sometimes there just needs to be structure. So that way you have a great customer experience. And so how do you guys handle customer experience being virtual, or if a problem does arise, how does a team member get to talk to their manager? How do those types of things work?
We use Slack. That is our sort of inner office communication, and it allows us to share files, to add things to our project management system, teamwork, we have structure around it as well. So our customer experience and customer support teams are the only ones that can really slack throughout the day, because they're dealing with urgent requests coming in from customers, and they need answers right away so that they can serve those customers. Our other departments, we have what is called Slack Attack. We want them to be able to focus on the things that they need to focus on. So if we have marketing that's working on a particular funnel, or a sales page, or a webinar that's coming up, they can't constantly be getting pinged with requests. And so our Slack Attack time is at 2:00 Mountain, because we have some people that are Eastern, some people that are Pacific. We have a couple team members in Canada, 2 in Mexico, 1 in Europe. And so we have a Slack Attack time that if it can wait, if it's not urgent, then this is when you will Slack someone a question. If it's a task, then we ask you to put it in our project management system, which is Teamwork, so that it doesn't get lost. Because if you have 100 different Slack messages going on throughout the day, nobody can remember all those things that you're requesting of them. So put it into Teamwork. You can notify them in Slack that you created a new task for them, but it needs to go into Teamwork. And that's how we communicate throughout the day. We also have Zoom meetings, depending on what's going on. As we were prepping for our virtual event and we were doing our own Rise Up World Challenge, we ended up having daily scrums. So we met for 30, 45 minutes a day, the key players. Every morning we went through what were new issues or items to discuss. We created action items out of those, and then we looked at previous days' action items to determine what the status was, make sure that those got done, and then moved on and went into the next day. So we'll do daily scrums depending on if we have something major happening organization-wide. Sometimes it'll just be department scrums if a department has something going on. But regardless, we do a weekly department meeting. So the marketing department will have one, the CE department, finance department has a meeting called a level 10 meeting, again, based off of the EOS model. And then our leadership team meets once a week as well for our own level 10 meeting, where things from the departments come up to the leadership team, decisions or shifts, changes, pivots from leadership team then get cascaded back down to our departments. And then we meet on a quarterly basis as a leadership team in person usually. Those we will fly our directors in to meet in person over 2 days.
That's awesome. That's really great. So lots of different meetings, but structure. So that way people, and I think that's one thing when you are a team member and you're starting somewhere, you have to create some structure for your time, because if you don't have control over your schedule, somebody else is building your schedule and you may feel like you can't get anything done. So whether you're virtual or you're working in an office somewhere, really taking the time to structure your schedule and not feel like you have to be at that begging call of the Slack or whatever other tool you may be using, even if it's email, right? You can't be checking that thing all day, every day, or you're not going to be getting your work done and working on those projects.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, I guess I'd just like to know a little bit more, if you want to share anything, like what have candidates done that, I guess maybe once they've started, how have they been successful in getting started with you? What advice would you give to somebody when you're starting off? What could they do to make sure that they start off on the right foot?
Well, we talked about communication already. So it's always better to over communicate than under communicate. Now, that doesn't mean to be a nag and ask every single little question about how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? I love a person that is a go-getter. Somebody who, instead of presenting the problem and looking for somebody to solve it for them, that tries to find solutions on their own and then brings me those solutions to say, I wasn't sure quite how to do this or how you guys do this, but I researched it a little bit. I Googled it and, I could either do it this way or this way or this way. What's your preference? And I'm like, oh, thank you. That's amazing. I would prefer for you to do it this way. Instead of them asking me this question, me having to take the time to sit there and think about, well, should they do it like this or should they do it like that? Or how about you go talk to this person? I love it when they're a go-getter. They go and try to find the solutions. They go and research it. Maybe they haven't gone through all their teamwork project management training yet, and they're trying to figure out how to do something. Well, they could ask me, but if they were to Google it, Teamwork has an amazing platform in YouTube where they've got hundreds of tutorial videos where they could go figure it out on their own and not have to ask me to do it. So I love it when any team members do that. And they don't just do it to me, but anyone else. So you have some team members that are it's just more natural for them to do that. And I think if it's not natural for any of you that are watching right now, trying to really develop that skill of helping yourself, trying to find the answers yourself, bringing solutions versus problems would be a huge help.
Yeah, I agree with you. And sometimes we don't know what might be the right answer. And sometimes we don't have all the confidence in the world. But taking the time to find those solutions and Google it, you should never have to have your manager say, Google it. Like that should not have to come out of their mouth. You should have already taken that step, because that's something we have now today. But I see it happen. And it's like, we have to trust ourselves enough to be able to come up with solutions. And I think if you approach it, like Jess said, that your manager does want you to win, and they're going to appreciate that you came to them initially, because then you're going to, after a while, you'll learn. You could start to get your feelers out and say, okay, this is what Jess likes. This is what she wants. I think this is what she would pick. And you can even start to make some of those decisions without having to then approach your manager about everything. But I think at first it is good. So then you get on the right track and you can build a little bit of that confidence And then the manager knows your thought process as well to say, oh, this is how you're getting to that. Okay, yeah, like you can go do that. And I'm sure you even get to a point where people will come to you and you can like, well, which decision would you make? Which choice? And you almost help them to then fly and take that off on their own.
Yeah, especially when it comes to apps and platforms, right? I mean, there's so much out there already as far as tutorials go. There should never be an instance when somebody is like, well, how do I enter a contact in Infusionsoft? That I know you can find online, right? But there may be other instances. So I don't want to say never go to your supervisor and ask them, or a fellow team member to ask them. There are other instances where you do need to ask those questions, right? So I'm just trying to think of an example. Contracts. That's one of the things that I've trained some of our team on is contracts, because we will negotiate stages for ourselves as well as some of our elite clients for them to speak at different conferences and stuff. And so we have sort of our checklist of things, like these are the things you want to make sure are addressed in this contract. But there are some of them that are subjective. And so there may be times where you have to ask the question, like, I'm not quite sure what the answer is, or I have the answer to how this is structured, but I don't have an example of how that's ever been put into a contract before. So how would you recommend that I do that? Here's a potential solution. So you can't always Google everything, right? But for the things you can, especially apps and platforms, definitely do that first. That makes an impression. When a team member comes to me and says, you asked me to do this, I didn't really know how to do it, but I Googled it and I figured it out and I saw the tutorial and I went ahead and walked it through. Can you review what I've done? I'm like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's taking that initiative. Well, sometimes if they come to you just with a problem, or even if they have an idea for something, it's like you don't always have the time because you're managing a large team. And so you may say, oh, well, don't worry about that, or we're not going to do that right now. And it's almost like, because we do, as leaders, we dismiss people's ideas sometimes, but not because they're not good ideas, not because the person doesn't have good ideas, not because we don't like the person, not because we don't believe in the person, but we have a limited amount of time. And if we feel like we have to do all the groundwork and we have to figure it all out, it may not be our top priority right now, where it could be a really good project for you if you're willing to come up with some of the solutions and not just throw all these ideas up. I know that was one thing that was said when I was hired to work with Charlie at the Wellness Center. It's like, we want a person, not just a person that has good ideas, but a person that also implements those ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think taking your ideas through and really being able to deliver on what you're doing is important as well.
Yeah, for sure. And also thinking about it from the perspective of, how can I save this person time, not use more of their time than they have? Because for those of you watching, you may not realize, like, you think, okay, they're hiring somebody new onto their team, so we're freeing up their time. But that first 3 months of onboarding you into our system, it actually takes a lot more time, energy, and effort on our part, knowing that in 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, you'll be able to fly on your own. But in the meantime, we are having to spend extra time, energy, and effort. So it's a compression on our time, and it's not so much of a relief. So then if you're, in addition to that, bringing more questions and issues, it's much more difficult for us to help you with the things and train you on the things that we really need you to know about. So hopefully that resonates with some of you watching.
Yeah, and you bring up really good points, because that training period is so critical. Because once you get 3-4 months in, everyone just expects you to know it by then. So you really have to protect that training time with somebody. I know I'm always like, please do your training task. Like, we're getting ready to hire a new team member, and I'm like, do not let her take on a project. She is not to get any projects. Like, nobody's to give her projects. Like, I know that she's already partially trained, but she has to get the full training time, because sometimes we want to jump. We see things and we're like, we could fix this, or I really have an idea for this thing. And we don't get the foundations of our job, and we don't get that foundational training. And you get a few months in and they're like, well, why can't you do that? Or why can't you do that efficiently? And it's like, you really want to take that time to set up those foundations and kind of protect them.
That's a great point. And we've made that mistake as an organization, growing so fast, where we've just thrown somebody into the deep end and expected them to swim. And it doesn't set them up for success. And sometimes we've even lost really great people for that role because it was too overwhelming for them. And that's just not fair.
Yeah.
We'll I told you I would end up being interrupted by the kids.
It's okay. We are in COVID right now. Like this is our life. I love it. Like if you go back and you watch some of the videos, like even last night, Dalton had come in and he's like standing here and I'm like, no, you're gonna go try to do signals. Or the other day, like the dog is like thumping his foot, and like my kids are supposed to be helping me, and they're helping me as kids help you. Like they are doing a good job. They're not doing a bad job. But it's like, I'm almost like texting. I'm like, dog. But then the phone falls and I'm like, ah. But this
well, I mean, it's almost lunchtime here, and for some reason my kids think they need to be fed, right? They're like, what can I eat?
Well, thank you so much for your time today. We've really, truly appreciated having you on, Jess. A wealth of knowledge. I think this has been a true value add in helping people to understand how to be successful virtually, how to be successful in their job, and really, different interview processes and how to take that seriously, because it's important to follow the steps and, find the right companies. And you want to find a company that's in alignment with who you are and where you're going. And
yeah. And I mean, just some closing thoughts that I'd love to share is that be authentic. Be authentic in your interview, because we can tell when it's too rehearsed. And depending on the company, I mean, I really ask deep questions so that I can get to know who you are as a person and figure out that alignment. And I think it's really imperative that you don't just practice some of the standard, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your hobbies that, you may typically practice with? I want to know who you are as a person. I want to know what makes you tick. I want to know how you've overcome obstacles or traumas or difficult situations in your past. I want to know who the most important person is in your life, because at our company, we're a family. Pete knows all of my kids' names. They call him Uncle Pete. We are really, really close knit. And so I want to make sure that there's that fit there. And I'd encourage everybody to think about, what are your core values as a person? What is important to you? If you were going to let somebody into your life, or the partner or your best friend, what is it about them that makes them your best friend? What is it about your partner that makes them your partner? And really think about, what are your core values as a person? And then when you are in that interview process, you can give examples that speak to your core value. You can really think about where in your life those core values came from, so that you can show up authentically.
Yeah, that's it. Authentically. If we can just be the same person we are at work, we're at home, we are with our friends. We just need to be one person. We just need to be ourselves, and we need to be okay being ourselves.
Yeah.
And we can always just be the best version of us. It's a beautiful place to be. It's wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for sharing with us. It's been an honor to have you here with us today. And I know that you're going to help so many graduates find those first jobs and have a little bit of comfort going in, and really want to give it their all to find the right companies and have that alignment.
Well, I appreciate you asking me. It was really an honor, and it was exciting, and happy to help anytime.
Yes. And if anybody is watching this and they haven't joined the Rise Up World Challenge, go join it, because it's free and it's fabulous and it's fun. And right now, I think all the positivity we can get in the world, we should get that. So take action and join the challenge. Alrighty. Hi, everyone.
Bye.